All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. Today, we are talking about building your personal risk profile. So sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at it. There you go. Who doesn't like a great guitar riff? It is a Monday. We love it. We got to get going. Thanks again for joining us this week at Inside My Canoe Head. Hey, listen, risk profile. Why is it important? Why do you need to listen to the next 20 to 30 minutes of this discussion about risk profiles? Really simple. Bottom line up front, you need to understand what bad things could happen to you and the extent of them, so that should you decide you want to do something about it, you know what you're doing something about. It's really that simple. The world is crazy. The 2020s are an incredibly disruptive decade for very good and understanding reasons why. The world is jostling around. It's everybody's elbowing each other at the state level for jockeying for position, moving into the next 70, 80 years of humanity, and who's going to be the big dog on the street. And a lot of these regional fights are just what they are. The world's resorting the order of things. That is potentially going to put a lot of extra pressure on a whole bunch of systems that maybe you rely upon. So the idea of a simple personal risk profile is to go through the exercise and understand what you're exposed to and what then you're in a position to decide, hey, listen, do I want to do something about it? Or am I comfortable? So that's the point of what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about risk as individual. We're going to talk about risk perception, understanding your risk, the 4 basic personal and major external sources of risk, and then why a personal risk register is a great idea. So thanks again for joining us. Listen, we appreciate all of your feedback that keeps coming back at insidemycanoehead.ca. All of the contact information is there. A shout out to my friends and listeners in northern Saskatchewan. You folks are wonderful and incredible. Thanks for reaching out. Listen, we're here to provide free advice, right? It's our community service. Yes, there's a business behind what we do, but this podcast is our resident-facing preparedness communications that's here to provide you real research and evidence-based material that helps you make better decisions in life. It's not apocalyptic. The world's not collapsing. We're not facing imminent societal collapse and a global EMP attack. However, it is going to be a bit of a bumpy ride over the next few years. So first of all, risk is individual. And I mean that clearly. Risk is a mathematical expression of a probability of an event occurring multiplied by the potential impact. That is going to be individualistic from the perspective of 10 people in a room could experience the very same event. And depending on how they've chosen to live their lives and a whole bunch of other variables, that same event could be significantly different in level of impact across a group of people. You could be sitting there in a classroom of 20 of your friends, right? You've gone through life together. You're getting ready to head off and tackle life in the world, but each one of you is facing a different set of risk profile. The same event can be catastrophic for one and inconsequential for a different one. And that's why risk is so seemingly complicated on the international stage, seemingly complicated when you look at the totality of the body of research and publications that have been put out about risk. Their entire risk professionals, people with certifications risk. Today, what I'm going to do for you is to take all that totality of the data that's out there and what people are saying and put it in a very simple package for you to listen to. A very simple set of things that will put you, after listening to this over the next 20 or 30 minutes, in a far better position should you choose to do the work necessary. Remember, everything we say here at Inside My Canoe Head, it's free of charge, right? Adopting a prepared life is adopting preparedness, and it's free. Doesn't cost you anything. Like, there is no amount of kit and equipment you can buy to adopt a prepared life. You won't be more prepared because you added 2 years of food in your basement. It doesn't work that way. We explain it to you on our 240 plus episodes that we have here at Inside My Canoe Head. But real risk is individual. We said that it's a fact, right? So if something occurs, The probability of an earthquake occurring where you live is certain probability. The impact based upon the house that you're living in is this. That risk, it's a fact. You can't argue with it. It's not up for you to debate whether that is A or B. It is what it is. A fact is something that we hold to be true based upon our current understanding of the world around us, and it will remain so until we have sufficient evidence to change our minds. And that's the thing about science that people don't really understand, and they get, well, we want a permanent answer. Well, we don't, because science is our best guess based upon what we know from the evidence and material that we've gathered, right? So that's how we help humanity as researchers and professors, is what we're trying to do is run as many continuous studies and research as we can to understand a phenomenon to the best of our ability, because how research works is we look at a series of events that have happened in the past, understand and examine their outcomes. That gives us the ability to give the best possible advice as to what is likely to occur in the future, right? This is not about us knowing and guaranteeing anything or giving anything more than a reasonably accurate statistic probability. But when you base it on evidence and research, we take out opinion and experience. And that's the difference between what we do. So risk perception, though, is your individual frame. That's you, your lens, and it's based upon your own personal biases and your personality. First of all, it's based upon your risk tolerance. So what does that mean? So everybody that's around you right now, or you're driving in your car, whatever you're doing, there's other humans reasonably around you, right? Everybody has a different level of comfort with uncertainty. You may be an individual who absolutely has to know every piece of information before you make a decision. And some people are comfortable with just, there's a lot of stuff I don't know, but I'm pretty good, right? We're good with that. Then it's your self-confidence. And your self-confidence is your own personal measure in your personal belief and your personal confidence in your own self's ability to execute something and to navigate a shock that happens. So if an event happens out of left field, out of the blue, what's your personal self-confidence in your ability to navigate that? And then we have a self-efficacy, which is more of a reflection on your reality of your skills and knowledge, right? There are people who have an overextended sense of self-confidence in their survival in the woods. Self-efficacy means, I actually have a set of skills. Like I've been doing backcountry paddling and backcountry camping for well over 40 years of my life. And I have said this to people. People talk about the apocalyptic scenario. I said, listen, if the world does go sideways and it all crashes, I give myself no better than 50% odds of surviving a year in the woods. And I've been doing it 40 years. That's the reality. That's a self-efficacy, self-check of, I know the reality of my skills built up over a series of decades, and because of that, I give myself a 50% chance. Now, my self-confidence is reasonably high in certain areas because I have a level of experience and I've gone through a series of events, but those are important, right? Because everybody's going to have a difference. So each risk through a different lens equals countless permutations. So you can look at that group of people that are around you and understand that if we're looking at a risk of an earthquake, depending on where you live, that's going to have a total different parameters, depending on your ability to relocate, depending on your ability to self-finance reconstruction. All of these things make the same event present a different risk profile to everybody. So how do we understand the risk? So if we understand what risk perception is, that lens through which you look at the world. And the reason I use lens, because it's like a set of glasses, right? So everybody has their own personal belief system and how the world should operate, right? It's that old normative versus positive discussion. Positive is how the world looks right now. Normative is how I would like it to be. Right? I really think the world should be like this. I wish the world was like that. People that talk like that are talking through a normative lens. They want the world to be a certain way. People with a positive viewpoint or positivism look at the world as it is. I may not like it. I may not agree with it, but I'm dealing with the world as it's presented to me now, right? The lens you look through. If you're a feminist, if you're a gender ideologist, if you're a patriarchal fan. It doesn't matter if you're believe strongly in the fight against climate change. If they all provide lenses through which you examine something. So if I'm a feminist and I'm examining a series of events or a phenomenon in the world, I'm looking at it with my bias of feminism, right? Or gender ideologialism, or however you want to look at it. The whole point is understanding who you are and understanding how you look through that lens, again, adds another level of complexity, right? So again, the same event will look 57 different ways to 22 different people, and that's the idea behind it. So how do you understand that risk, right? Let's move this conversation along. Number one, it's the choices you've made, right? This is the personal responsibility part. Look at that incredible person, that handsome, beautiful person in the mirror, and you got to understand your number one choices, the lifestyle you have chosen to live. And let's zero back to what we call the foundation of personal preparedness, which is your mental, physical, and financial health. So if you've chosen to live a life of high anxiety and high stress, that impacts your life. That puts you at a certain set of risk profile. If you've decided to live a lifestyle where you take no care of your physical health, you eat junk, you don't sleep well, and you don't exercise, then you've added a whole bunch of additional risks to your life because of choices you've made. And the same thing we'll say with your financial health. If you don't have an emergency savings account, if you run out of money before you run out of month, and you're constantly stressed about the amount or lack thereof of money in your bank account, you've chosen to live that lifestyle. And by those choices of your lifestyle, you're adding risk. So I create risk by doing X, or I mitigate risk by doing Y. For example, this morning I got up. I'm 53 years old. I'm not in the best shape of my life, but I'm getting there. I'm on a plan. I'm on a row. So I get up and I go for a walk, right? It's a 30-minute walk with a 40-pound weight vest, right? I'm not running. I'm not jogging. I'm just exercising, right? I'm trying to make the right choices. So I'm lowering the risk probability that I have a medical event, right? I'm influencing my risk by choices I make. If I sit now, last night watching the Super Bowl, go Chiefs go, I might have been eating some fat pills. That, again, added to my risk profile. So that's your set of choices. Your mental, your physical, and your financial health. How you choose to live that lifestyle, you're adding or subtracting risk. Let's look at your location, right? 97.2% of the people who listen to this podcast, we're in 51 countries now. 97.1% of those countries are democracies, right? They are democracies in the sense where you have freedom to move from where you are to a different location. So you've chosen to live where you are now. If you're an adult, you've chosen. If you haven't moved, you've chosen. Not doing anything is a choice, by the way, right? So if you happen to be in Dalton somewhere, or you happen to be in Edmonton, Alberta, or Miami, Florida, or in the Bayou in Mississippi or Louisiana, it doesn't matter. You've chosen to live there. You have the opportunity to leave. That's perfectly fine. You love where you are. I think that's awesome. Sense of place matters, but just that creates and adds a simple different set of risk. As well, the style of housing you live in, right? So if you live in single-family residence, if you live in a rural area, urban area, suburban area, medium to high density, so that would be an apartment building or a condo tower, the choice of you living in that type of housing is adding a set of risks to you, right? So you see how the risk profile that you're facing is being built principally on the choices you're making. The next one is your employment, right? How do you choose? Because again, we call one of the rules of life, it's your responsibility to pay your own way while you're a human on this earth. So you work. How do you do that work? Entrepreneurial, you're a tradesperson, you're in the military, you're a police officer, you're in the healthcare system, whatever type of employment you've chosen to pursue, that employment comes with a certain set of risk profile. There's a difference between a career in the infantry in the army and a librarian. They have different threat profiles and different risk profiles, right? Again, it's a choice. You're in a democratic country. And the last one is your leisure, right? So what do you do when you're not working, right? When you're not taking care of the basic ablution requirements of a human being and you're not working, what are you doing, right? Do you skydive or do you read, right? So the choices you make, and these aren't good or bad choices. It's not like you're doing something wrong by living the life that you want to live. The idea of understanding risk is saying, I've chosen to live this life, right? I think it's really cool that I ride a motorcycle. I think it's really cool that I skydive. I think it's really cool that I love living on the 47th floor of a condo in a downtown city because I love the vibe. I love the place, the sense of adventure. Everything I do about it, I sincerely love my life. And that's a great place to be. What we're saying here today is we're here to tell you that that is awesome and you don't need to change it. Understanding your risk profile is not about deleting parts of your life and going to live in a box in the ground to prevent anything from happening to you, because that is a horrible existence. It's about simply understanding the risk that you take forward. And this is what preparedness offers, because if I understand the risk from being a skydiver, it doesn't mean I'm going to stop skydiving because I want to live in a bubble. It means, what measures can I take to mitigate that risk, to lower a potential bad event, but still be able to skydive? See that difference? That's the frame we're looking for when we look at risk. It's not about saying I got to sell my condo and buy that single family home on 40 acres in northern Ontario or eastern Colorado. It's saying that I understand where I am and I do what I do because I think it's rocking an incredible life. I wouldn't change it for the world, but I do it with the knowledge. And then we have external sources. So those first four, your choices you make in your lifestyle, your mental, physical, and your financial health, the location and type of housing you lived in, the employment and leisure choices you've made in life, those are all choices you have, right? But they're actually very small choices when you consider the internal, external world of dichotomy of control, as the Stoics talk about. There's a lot of external, and I just classify this as everything else, right? It's exogenous shock. It's everything that can come from the outside. So if you want to classify it, we do that here at Preparedness Labs Incorporated and at Inside My Canoe Head. And we talk about economic risk, we talk about political risk, and we talk about physical risk. So economic risks are things that can be done to the economic system you rely upon by other people or other organizations or other governments, right? So for example, I'm an entrepreneur. I own a company. I'm trying to do something, right? Or I work for, I work at a bank, right? I work at a bank. A bunch of other people could do some really dumb stuff and place some economic pressures that causes my bank to close and causes me to lose my job, right? There are economic risks that exist out there. And depending, again, risk is individual. So depending on how you have chosen to live your life in your employment, you've got external economic risk. Then you've got external political risk. It's 2024. Our friends in the United States of America, God bless you. I have no idea how you're going to navigate this thing that's coming in 2024. And I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, or if you're one of those people in the middle who call themselves independent. Like this is going to be worth at least 3 bags of popcorn come November. And I'm going to be sitting in Banff, Alberta, at a conference on disaster, and we're going to be watching this. There's nothing else going to be going on that night because we're going to be watching the U.S. election. But political risk is real, right? If you're pursuing a certain type of economic investment and you've got a government that coming in that sees the world through a different lens and wants to restrict how you do your job or how you want to, that's a political risk, right? And then we have physical risk. These are just things that can happen that can physically cause you harm from external sources that are beyond your control. So if you understand that, the dichotomy of control is basically this. What we talk about when we reference Stoic principles is there are things that you can control, the first set of risk sources that I talked about, and there are things you cannot control, which are the second set of risk sources that I talked about. You have internal and external risk sources. If you classify it simply as that, you then look at your internal risk sources, you understand them, you picture them, and you build something we call a personal risk register. Now, you can do this on a whiteboard. You can do it in your brain. You can do it as part of your monthly preparedness plan review that we recommend here at Inside My Canoe Head on our preparedness strategy. Yeah, and we're crystal clear on it. Preparedness should not occupy more than 30 minutes a month. Let me say that again clearly for those in the back. Preparedness should not occupy more than 30 minutes a month of your total life. Now, when you build your first risk profile, that's going to take a couple hours of investment of time. When you first build your first from scratch personal or household preparedness plan, that's going to take a couple hours of your time. No money, absolutely no money investment, but the time and effort planning that you put in pays massive dividends in the end. Look at that person in the mirror. This is all I'm saying. Look at that incredible person in the mirror and ask yourself, are you worth a couple hours? No money. I don't care whether you have 5 cents or $15,000 in your checking account. Are you worth the money? Very simple question. You build the personal risk profile very much similar to what government departments do. And I used to work at strategic level in the government, not at a high position, but within the strategic level. And it's very similar to what is taught in business continuity planning for businesses, is that you have to build some form of recording and referencing the risk that you're exposed to, right? Again, this is not about getting rid of your risk and minimizing all of the risk in life. It's about having a, let's call it a no poop assessment of looking in the mirror and saying, what am I exposed to, so that I honestly understand what it is I'm exposed to by the choices I've made and by the world that I've chosen to live in. You record and assess your risk. Really simple. Exposure to risk and the potential outcomes, right? So, for example, I live on a earthquake fault. Now, I experienced a pretty wild earthquake in 2010 or 2009, the first time that I moved to the city of Ottawa. And I was holding on to my desk and rocking around in my cubicle at work. And the whole building was given a good shake and I was barely hanging on. I was actually on the phone with a colleague in Edmonton and I said, I have to go. We're having an earthquake. And of course, she being a good Army officer, fired a one-liner at me and called it BS. I said, no, you don't understand. Like, we're actually facing an earthquake here. I got to go. And I hung up on her. It was really weird. Now, I haven't felt one since, but I live on a fault line. That's a choice of the location I've made, right? So now that's an experience learning, but if I didn't know if I was in an earthquake zone, I should probably look that up. If I didn't know my home was on a floodplain, I should probably look that up, right? These are just smart things for you to do, but the understanding is I go through those internal sources first. And this is how I build the risk register, right? So I go through my choices: lifestyle, mental, physical, and financial health. And we talk about this in our book, Preparedness Simplified, book one, The Beginning. It's an ebook that's available for $7 Canadian and a lot less American on Amazon. We talk about it there of how to look at your physical, mental, and financial health. So I basically look at the choices that I've made, the location that I have chosen to live in and the type of housing. I look at the employment that I've chosen, and I look at the leisure activities that I do. And I lay them out, and then I look at a set of risk profiles. So, for example, one of my favorite leisure activities on the face of this earth is to do backcountry paddling, right? So that's a choice I make. Nobody forces me to do it. Once a year, periodically I miss, but once a year I generally try to go on an epic canoe trip. Now, this year in May, I'm going to be in the backcountry of northern Saskatchewan on the Churchill River with a bunch of other crazy Canucks, and we're going to do a 7-day, 6-night, pretty aggressive paddle through some rapids, portaging way, way back in the country, to the point where I don't have any cell coverage, right? Obviously. So that's a risk that I've now increased my risk to some form of bad outcome as a result of the choices that I've made. So that trip alone is worth a couple of minutes sitting at a whiteboard and going through what are, again, we go back to the definition of risk. What are the probability of an event occurring versus the potential impact gives me, through the lens that, as I understand the world, gives me an idea of what could go wrong. It's a way of answering that question. What could go wrong, right? That's a choice I make. Nobody forces me to go canoeing and backcountry paddling. I love it. Wouldn't turn it up for the world, so I do it. So the key to understanding your risk is to understand it to the greatest extent possible. There is a law of diminishing returns in risk registering, which means if you go down a rabbit hole of trying to understand everything that could probably ever happen to you and come up with your risk and probability of outcome, you could come up with about 175 mathematical equations. You are way down a rabbit hole. It's time to throw yourself a lifeline and drag your arse out of there, okay? That's not the percent. That's not the point here. It's to the greatest extent possible until you see the edge of the rabbit hole and stop. And it basically means if you go through those 4 sources of personal risk, and then you take an interesting, fun look at the exogenous shock of economic, political, and physical risk, and then you just get some ideas and you build a risk register, right? And so how do you codify this? And we're going to end on this because the podcast at the end of this week is going to take you down the next step of your personal risk profile. Is you're classifying risk in one of 3 ways. You're classifying it in lights. And we love the street light thing. We use it everywhere. It's very simple. Everybody understands green, yellow, red, right? There's no such life as zero risk. It doesn't exist on the face of this earth, right? Wherever you live, whatever you do, you will face risk. You can't get that to zero, right? So green means it's an acceptable risk, right? It's life, man. Stuff happens. I mean, you can't mitigate against everything. So there is acceptable risk, which will largely be, based upon your comfort with uncertainty and your own self-confidence. What we talked about based on your own personal risk tolerance, right? Then you have yellow, which is cautionary, right? Things that give you concern, things that make you go, and maybe I should think about this one a little bit more. Maybe I should examine this one a little bit more. And then there's the red, which is unacceptable risk. These are the things that you are doing, that you're exposed to by the choices you've made in life, that you just realize and you look at it go, not sure about that one, big fella. I think we need to have a little chat about that. And there won't be many because you're this far downrange in life. But they're likely going to be a few red ones, and then those are ones that we'll deal with, and what do you do next? So the idea is you go first from the perspective of understanding that risk is individual. It's a mathematical expression of probability times potential impact. It's a fact. It's not in dispute. It is what it is. But you have a personal risk perception based upon your risk tolerance, your comfort, your uncertainty, your self-confidence, and your self-efficacy. Each risk will be different for everybody around you. It's countless permutations and outcomes, which is why you need to take a few minutes to do this. And we understand that your risk comes from 2 principal sources, internal and external. The internal risks are based upon choices you make of your lifestyle, your mental, your physical, your financial health, your location and the type of housing you live in, the employment and the leisure activities you take. That is generally the totality of risks that are within your control, based upon decisions you make. The external ones, the political, economic, and physical risk, well, those are things that are not within your control, but it's really good to understand them. You take the totality of that, you build yourself some form of personal risk register, a way of recording it and understanding it. You classify them red, green, yellow, and then you decide what you're going to do from that step forward. That's the next episode. So hopefully this conversation, this discussion here at Inside My Canoe Head was helpful. And talking about how to build a personal risk profile, why it's important to you, why it's something that we recommend you do. Again, it's an investment of time and energy. It costs 0 money. That's preparedness for you, right? It's an investment of time and energy, not an investment of financial capital. So thanks for joining us this week again at Inside My Canoe Head. Please continue to give us your feedback. If you like the podcast, there's an option on our website, www.insidemycanoehead, to drop by and buy me a coffee. If you don't want to spend $5 Canadian and a lot less American, I completely understand that. Then I would appreciate you going to Apple Podcasts and giving us a great review. Simple, doesn't cost any money. This is also available on our YouTube platform. It's available. We're across social media. We do our best to get the information out. If there's something you would like to hear or an episode about a certain given topic, drop us a line. We've had a couple in the past that we've happily created an episode for you specifically on a topic and broadcast it out on the air. Thanks once again to over the 10,000 downloads we've had here at Inside My Canoe Head, the 51 countries that we're in, and the 600 plus locations on this globe. Thank you. Take care. Stay safe. And we'll see you next time.